Hey there, Cyclones. We are going to look at adding and subtracting mixed numbers again today. I am going to do one problem like we talked about in the last class with improper fractions. But then I have decided to go ahead and go through the other method. And this is why. When you're working with improper fractions, you're going to get some really, really big numbers. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of error in that. And so I'm going to give you another method to kind of help stay away from those bigger numbers. It does require you to pause and really think about what you're doing. So I encourage you today just to choose to be focused so that you can understand and be successful with these. Let's go ahead and dive right in. We're going to use method 1, which is our improper fractions from last class, to go ahead and do number 1a. So negative 1 4/5 minus 2 1/2. So I'm going to change both of them into improper fractions to get started. Let me make it a little bit bigger here for you. All right, negative 1 4/5. Now, when doing improper fractions, don't worry about the negatives, okay? So I'm just going to have a negative. 1 times 5 is 5, plus 4 gives me 9/5, minus 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5/2. So those are my improper fractions. I'm going to find my least common denominator. In this case, it's going to be 10. So then we ask ourselves, what do we need to multiply? The 5 and the 9, I'm going to multiply by 2. The 2 and the 5, I'm going to multiply by 5. And then we'll rewrite our new fractions. So now I have negative 18/10 minus 25/10. Now at this point you really have to pause and think about, what am I really doing here? Notice we do have subtraction, right? So we're going to use our additive inverses or our keep, change. All we can do here, or need to do here, is keep the first, change subtraction to addition, and make the next number the opposite. So now I have negative 18 plus negative 25. You need to recognize here that since I'm now adding and I have two negatives, okay, then I'm going in the same direction where the same team is scoring. So I'm going to add these numbers together and keep the answer negative. So that's going to lead me to negative 43/10. Writing that as a mixed number would be negative 4 3/10. If you have any questions, go ahead and pause, talk to a neighbor, work out any things that you need before we move on to the next method. All right, so the next method, we're actually going to do the exact same problem. So if you look down on your notes, the exact same problem on 1b. But I'm going to talk about the directions first. So here's kind of our steps. Method 2 is separating and regrouping. So really what we're going to first do is we really have to use our brains to kind of say, okay, if these were just integers, am I going to be adding them together because, I don't know, they're the same sign? Or am I going to be subtracting because they're different signs? So it's kind of looking at that additive inverse and thinking, what are we really doing? And then you need to ask yourself, is my answer going to be positive or negative? If you don't answer these two questions before you get started, this method will not be easy. But if you can kind of wrap your head around this, then I think we're going to be just fine. And then I have just two separate things. If you end up really adding, so you're actually going to be adding those numbers together, just add the fractional parts together with common denominators. Then add the whole number parts, combine and simplify. Very straightforward. We saw a little bit of this in our last day's notes. However, if you are subtracting, okay, no matter, you're going to already remember if it's negative or positive, right? So if you're subtracting, you're going to find whatever the larger number is, and you're going to set it up where you're subtracting the smaller number from it, even if that looks different than the original problem. Because we're doing that same thing anyway, and I'll explain that here in just a minute. Then you're going to subtract your fraction parts, and there might be regrouping. We'll talk about that. Then subtract your whole number parts, and then simplify if possible. But don't forget, if you said up at the beginning that your answer is going to be negative, make sure you put a negative sign at that end. All right, Let's look at what this actually looks like with some numbers. All right, coming here at 1b. Let's say we look at this as if we didn't have fractions. So let's just say our problem was -1 minus 2. Now we have learned that when we're working with negatives to use additive inverses. So change subtraction to addition, take the opposite of the second number, keep, change, change. So if I were to apply that here, I'd keep the -1, change addition to subtraction, and make my 2 negative. So now I can look at -1 plus -2. Those are the same sign, so I'm actually going to add those numbers together and keep the same sign. In this case, I'm going to keep it as a negative, so my final answer should be negative. Now remember, we've already done this problem right above. This is just a different method, and we're going to be practicing this method today. So knowing that it's going to be negative, all I really need to worry about is adding these two things together. So we're going to set it up a little bit differently. Since we're adding, order doesn't matter. So I'm going to do 1 and 4/5. And I'm going to set it on top or vertically, just like you used to do addition problems. 2 and 1/2. Now I still have to get common denominators because my denominators still need to be the same. So I'm still going to go for 10, which means I need to multiply this by 5. This hasn't changed. Okay, so 5/10 times 2 times 2, we have 8/10. And now I'm just adding together. So at this part, I no longer have this because I've rewritten them over here. So I'm going to do 8 plus 5. So now I have 13/10. And I'm going to do 2 plus 1. So now I have 3. I need to add these together, but hopefully you notice this is an improper fraction. So I'm going to change this to a mixed number real quick. 10 can go into 13 one time and have 3 left over. Bring down your whole number of 3. 3 plus 1 is 4 and 3/10. Now, don't forget, you already told me the answer should be negative. So I need to make sure that I go back and write negative in my answer. Common mistake. But please notice now, we got the same answer at the top. Different method, but we got the same answer. All right, we're going to practice this method a little bit more today. If you have any questions, please ask to pause, and then you can talk to a neighbor, talk to the teacher, whatever you need to do to get your question answered before we move on to the next question. Pause if needed. All right, so here's going to be the next problem. Now I will tell you this one gets a little trickier. So we're going to start the same way we did last time. Just imagine if these were whole numbers. 1 minus 2. Okay, what are we really going to be doing? So we know that we want to do keep, change, change since we have subtraction. So this means we're going to do 1 plus the negative. Keep, change, change. So now I have a positive 1 and I have a negative 2. So I have different signs. So when they're not on the same team, I'm actually going to subtract. So different signs tells me to subtract. And I'm going to keep the sign of the larger number. In this particular case, my 2 is larger, so my answer is going to be negative. Don't forget about that at the very end. So really what I'm doing is subtracting. So if you look back at these notes, we're going to be looking at 2b. If subtracting, we're going to write the larger number minus the smaller number. So what that looks like here is this. We're going to start with 2 and 3/8. 2 and 3/8. Subtract 1 and 3/4. Now, I still need common denominators. That has not changed. My common denominator, need to write it down, is going to be 8. 3/8 is already that way, so 4 times 2, 3 times 2. Don't forget to do that to the numerator. All right, so when I rewrite this, now I have 6/8. 3/8. I no longer have this. Now I'm subtracting. So I'm going to subtract just like my directions say. It says to subtract your fraction parts first, regroup if needed, which we're going to be doing, then subtract your whole number parts. So when I come back here, I cannot do 3 minus 6. Okay, I cannot take away 6 from 3. So I'm going to regroup. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to take from this group. So if I take from 2, that's going to become a 1. But when I come to add it to this part, what am I really going to be adding? 8, because 8 tells me that 1 whole would be 8/8. Okay, our denominator tells us the size or how many pieces would make a whole. So this needs 8 pieces, which means I'm going to be adding 8 to that numerator. This is the regrouping. This is the part that you really need to be focused on when you're working through this. So for the sake of organization, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite our entire problem with all this new information. So now I have 1, and I'm going to do 8 plus 3, 11/8 minus 1 and 6/8. Now I can do 11 minus 6. 5/8. 1 minus 1 is 0. So my final answer is 5/8. But wait. It needs to be negative because we told us from the beginning that it was going to be a negative answer. Do not forget the negatives. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I know that is a lot. If you need to go back and watch this video, it's for you on Google Classroom. Go back and watch the video. If you think, okay, I would need a couple more practice problems, lucky for you, there's some more practice problems on the back of this page. I'm going to go ahead and go through the back of those examples. So if you just want to turn there now, there are 4 examples on this page. I'm going to go through them on the video. You can use this video to check your answers at whatever pace you need. It's for you. So I want you to pause. I want you to try some of these, and then on your own, when needed, go back and watch this video so you can check your answers. Be patient, keep trying, don't give up. You got this, Cyclones. All right, walking through this problem, if I were looking at just integers, -9 plus -1. Okay, I see that they're the same sign, so I'm going to add them together, keep the negative. So that means my answer should be negative, and I'm just adding. So order doesn't really matter. I just need to get my common denominators and go with it. So if I'm going to rewrite my problem, I would have 9 and 5/7 plus 1 and 1/3. And I get common denominators. I'm going to say my least common denominator is going to be 21. So times 3 times 7. I'm going to rewrite my problem so it's easier for me to kind of follow along with that. 9 and now 15/21 plus 1 and 7/21. Add those together. I'm going to start with my fractional pieces. So I'm really just looking at 15 plus 7. That's going to be 22/21. And then 9 plus 1 is 10. Now you have to make sure you look. This is still improper because this number is bigger than that. So that means I'm going to turn that over. It's going to give 1 over to those whole numbers. So my answer actually here is going to be 11 and 1/21. If you are doing this method with improper fractions, I'll walk you through that as well. Doesn't necessarily take as long, but it is a lot more work. So really quickly, I'll do that. If I'm going to go from 9 and 5/7 as an improper fraction, it's going to be 63 plus 5, 68/7. 1 and 1/3 would become 4/3. Still need common denominators, so I'm still going to multiply both by 3 here. and by 7 here, leaving you with 68 times 3. That's going to be a big one. So again, these improper fractions give you some pretty big numbers. So that's 180, 90, 204 over 21. Remember, I'm adding, and I'm going to have 28 over 21. So all I've done is taken this and just kind of put it over there. And I'm going to add those together. You're going to get 232 over 21. And then 21 goes into 231 11 times with 1 left over. All right, there's both methods for you. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next question. All right, now this is 5 3/10 minus 7/8. This is just actually a typical subtraction problem as far as the larger number is having a smaller number subtracted from it. So if you want to change it to addition and then take the negative, that's fine, but it's not really necessary for this particular problem. I am, however, going to write it up and down. So 5 3/10 minus 7/8. Remember, we still need common denominators, so between 10 and 8, my least common denominator is going to be 40. So that means I'm going to multiply by 4 on this fraction and by 5 on this fraction. Okay, rewriting everything that we have, we end up with 5 12/40 minus 35/40. Again, I cannot do 12 minus 35. So I'm going to regroup with this mixed number. So I'm going to take from the 5, leaving me with 4. But that means I'm actually adding 40. Remember, our denominator tells us what makes a whole. So now, again, rewriting, I end up with 4 52/40 after adding my 40 plus 12 minus 35/40. Now I can actually subtract 52, which is my numerator, 52 minus 35, leaving me with 17 over 40. 4 minus 0 is 4. My bigger number was positive to begin with, so my answer will be positive. If you want to see this with improper fractions, I'll show you that other method also. So 5 3/10 becomes 53/10, and 7/8 doesn't need anything because it's not a mixed number anyway. So again, I still need common denominators. I'm still going to go with the common denominator of 40. That's not changing. So I'm going to times by 4 here, times by 5 here. I'm going to end up with, now see how this math is a little more difficult. Okay, so you have to be really good with your math facts to do this improper fraction business, right? So 5 times 4, that's 20, so 212/40 minus, and then we have 35/40. Then you can subtract across the top. 212 subtract 35 gives you 177/40. Or if you were to simplify that, turn it back into that mixed number, you would get 4 17/40. Just takes you a lot longer to get there. Excellent. There's 2 more, so let's just keep going. If you need the help, use the help. All right, if we're at 7 2/3 plus negative 4 5/9. So if I just kind of imagine 7 plus negative 4 These are different signs, so I'm going to actually subtract and keep the larger sign. The larger sign in this case is positive, so my answer is going to be positive, but I am going to be using subtraction. So when I'm using subtraction, I'm going to start with the larger number. In this case, it comes first anyway. 7 2/3 minus 4 5/9. I need common denominators. My least common denominator is going to be 9. So times by 3 times by 3. I like to rewrite my problem, so now I have 7 6/9 minus 4 5/9. Looks like I'm not going to have to regroup because I can do 6 minus 5. 6 minus 5 leaves you with 1/9. Subtract your whole number parts. 7 minus 4 is 3. So my final answer is 3 1/9. I am happy to do this in the improper fraction method in case that's the method you prefer. So if we're doing that, we have 7 2/3 as an improper fraction is 21 plus 2, 23/3. 4 5/9 as an improper fraction is 41/9. And we still need common denominators, so I still multiply this by 3. Notice my numbers are getting bigger and bigger as I go through here. So then 23 times 3, we have 69/9 minus 41/9. Leaving us with 28/9. And if we put that back, I can take 3 groups of 9 out. That's 27 with 1 left over. Leads us to the same answer. All right, we've got one more for practice. Let's see how you're doing. All right. Here, at the very, very beginning, I notice I don't even have a whole number part. So let's just say I use 1. Okay, 1 minus -4. Well, if I'm subtracting with negatives, I know that I'm going to keep change. So this is really like 1 plus 4. So it's going to be just addition, a straight addition problem. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that around. And I'm going to go ahead and set up my problem with least common denominators. So I'm going to start with 12/15. I'm going to have 4 7/10. My least common denominator is going to be 30, which means my 15 needs to be multiplied by 2 along with the numerator. My 10 needs to be multiplied by 3 along with its numerator. Rewriting my entire problem, I get 24/30 plus 4 and 21/30. Add your fractional parts together first. So I am going to be adding 24 plus 21, which gives you 45/30. 4 plus 0 is 4. But then you always have to have your thinking caps on and noticing, hey, that's improper. So I need to turn that and kind of regroup in that way. And so 45/30 is equal to 1 15/30. So that 1 gets added to that 4. So now I'm at 5. And I'm going to simplify this by 15 anyway. So my answer ends up being 5 1/2. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. You survived. You did it. I believe in you. Excellent job. Keep practicing. Look at these over and over and over again. Do them over and over again on an extra piece of paper. You will get there. I guarantee it. Thanks for hanging in there. Have a wonderful week.